GDP is an important data of the national economy, and countless people are eagerly waiting for when China's GDP will double again. But in fact, as long as we learn from the advanced systems of the United States, India, and even Taiwan, China's GDP can easily double. Our GDP statistics method in mainland China is currently very backward and rigid. Only value-added tax invoices are recognized, and those that are not issued will not be included in the GDP calculation. For example, for small and micro enterprises in China, small businesses, and housing rentals, if they take the initiative to issue a VAT invoice at the tax bureau, it will be counted as GDP. But this is obviously an economic activity, and it is obviously a part of GDP, so how can it not be counted? The whole world counts this into GDP, but China does not. In order to accurately count the country's GDP, the United States even invented the concept of virtual rent, which means that if you live in the house you bought, the rent should also be counted. The reason is this: the preferred rent must be included in the GDP. This is a matter of course. No matter whether you build or not, it should be included in the GDP. On the basis that the rent must be included in the GDP, if you rent the house bought by others, and others come to rent the house you bought, wouldn't that create double rent? You live in your own house, which is also an economic activity. It cannot be excluded from GDP just because you don't pay rent to yourself. Although this cannot be regarded as illegal tax evasion, it is an illegal destruction of GDP. Therefore, the U.S. Bureau of Statistics will estimate the rent of your house, and then directly calculate it into GDP, whether you live in it yourself or rent it out. So now all the houses in the United States are rented out in the books of the Statistics Bureau, and a large amount of GDP is born day and night. The GDP born out of this is an astronomical figure, don't underestimate it. In 2020, the U.S. Census Bureau announced that the virtual rent of self-occupied residents in the country reached $1.73 trillion US dollars, accounting for 8.3% of the total U.S. GDP that year. However, China's GDP in 2020 is only 14.7 trillion US dollars, and the virtual rent of the United States alone has reached as much as 10% of China's GDP. Most of the houses in China are self-occupied, especially in small and medium-sized cities. Few of them are rented out, and very few of them are willing to issue invoices. If China can include the estimated virtual rent of self-housing and even rural self-built houses into GDP, it will definitely achieve a surge in GDP. A conservative estimate will give China's GDP an increase of more than 1 trillion US dollars out of thin air. In addition to the very advanced virtual rent system in the United States, there is also a very advanced wage system for housewives. The reasoning is this: there are many housewives in the United States who take care of their children at home and do housework, and there are also many elderly people who help out. These are without wages or income. But they are indeed working. 100% of national economic activities should of course be included in GDP. Is this a problem? If they don't do housework in their own home, but go to other people's house to do housework, and everyone changes house to do housework, then wouldn't they be paid? Therefore, housewives and elderly people who help take care of children at home should be converted according to the wages of market employees, and they cannot be counted as GDP just because they do not receive wages. Therefore, the U.S. Census Bureau estimates an annual labor cost of $600 billion US dollars for housewives across the United States, which is included in the national GDP. If China can adopt the system of learning, then GDP can skyrocket hundreds of billions of dollars out of thin air. There are also lawyer fees. China's legal process is too simple compared to the United States, and the lawyer fees paid by ordinary people are too small compared to the United States, which is not conducive to the vitality of the national economy and the growth of GDP. Lawyers in the United States earned $1.34 trillion last year, contributing 6.7% of U.S. GDP. In contrast to China, the GDP contributed by lawyer fees in 2019 was only 10 billion US dollars, accounting for only 0.06% of China's GDP, which is extremely inconsistent with our status as the world's second economic power. If China's judicial process can be reformed so that China's lawyer fee income is as lucrative as that of the United States, it is conservatively estimated that it can increase China's GDP by trillions of dollars and provide a large number of jobs. There is also the gun industry. The guns sold to the common people can not only create a large amount of GDP every year, but also generate 550 billion US dollars in medical expenses and property losses every year, which will greatly stimulate the prosperity of GDP. If China can learn from the United States to open up civilian guns to support themselves, there is no doubt that the national medical expenses and insurance expenses will skyrocket, and the GDP will definitely prosper rapidly. The United States also consumes 80% of the world's opioid-addicted drugs, bears 1.75 trillion US dollars in college student loans, and costs 100 times more for nucleic acid than China. All of these will bring a large GDP gap. As for hawkers, small and micro enterprises will definitely be included in the GDP of the United States, and they will also be included without invoicing, so as to help you estimate a GDP. Even drugs and sex trafficking will be included in the GDP of the United States. Even the houses that ordinary people live in will be included in the GDP. How can it be possible for drug dealers and prostitutes to evade responsibility for the prosperity of the US GDP, let alone small and micro businesses, which are included in the GDP as a matter of course? All of the above belong to the service industry in the classification of the US Census Bureau, so the service industry accounts for 80% of the total GDP of the United States. According to the data of the United States in 2021, the GDP contributed by the manufacturing industry is only 2.2 trillion US dollars, accounting for only 11.6% of the national GDP. Therefore, as long as China reforms the current backward system and implements it according to the US, then the GDP will skyrocket soon, and doubling out of thin air is not a problem. However, the GDP statistics system of the United States is still too backward, and it is far behind India's advanced system. If we in China can learn from India's advanced system, then the rate of GDP growth will definitely be faster. Of course, India has adopted the virtual rent system of the United States, but the US Bureau of Statistics will calculate it according to the market rent, only for valuable commercial housing, but India has included all the slums in the country into the statistics. Those iron houses that are close to city garbage, it is also included in the statistics, and a very high rent is estimated. Many slums in India are next to bustling urban areas, and the Bureau of Statistics calculates the virtual rent for slums directly based on the average rent in the bustling urban areas. The virtual rent is not a problem, the problem is that the data compiled by the Bureau of Statistics of India with this thing is too hot. Similar practices also appear on Indian cars. The Bureau of Statistics of India does not recognize the market price, and thinks that you are all falsely reporting the price. Every Tata car made in India is calculated according to the price of an Audi imported from Germany at the Bureau of Statistics. From sales to leasing, all GDP is calculated at this price. Then the Bureau of Statistics of India found that many farmers in India directly buried the manure of cattle and sheep in the field as fertilizer, which was not included in the GDP statistics, and was very angry. These are fertilizers, which should be calculated according to the market price of fertilizers. How can they be counted as GDP? So the famous cow dung GDP appeared. The dung produced by cattle and sheep all over India every year will be estimated by the Indian Bureau of Statistics as a GDP and included in the statistics, no matter how you use it. In fact, India's system is quite reasonable. Even if it is for self-use, it is indeed fertilizer, which has value, and of course it should be included in GDP calculations. There are still many Indian systems worth learning. For example, India is actually the country with the largest road mileage in the world. The official announcement is that the country has a total of 8 million kilometers of roads, far surpassing China. How did it come true? First of all, the roads in all of India, even if they are dirt roads with bumps and holes in the countryside where people and cattle and sheep walk, as long as the car can barely pass, it is considered a road. If this kind of dirt road can be regarded as a road, wouldn't the high-grade road be? Yes, it's a waste of mileage, so in order to avoid this waste, India counts all roads across the country as one-way streets. It means that if this road has 2 lanes, it should of course be calculated as 2 roads. After all, the construction volume is 2 single-lane roads. If this road is 4-lane, it should of course be calculated as 4 roads. After all, the construction volume is 4 single-lane roads. If this is an 8-lane expressway, it should of course be calculated as 8 roads, and 1 kilometer repaired is counted as 8 kilometers. Don't think this is exaggerating the data. The Bureau of Statistics of India still feels that it is a loss. After all, the cost of building 8 dirt roads is not as good as this expressway. It is already a blood loss based on 8 times the mileage. So India has the world's first road mileage. Then there is the forest coverage rate. The most critical criterion for counting this indicator is how to define the forest. The international practice is to count the land with a tree canopy density greater than 10% as a forest. The Bureau of Statistics of India has no objection to this, but has proposed how to define trees' own opinion. India believes that as long as the height exceeds 0.1 meters, that is, 10 centimeters, whether it is shrubs or weeds, and then covers more than 10% of the land area, then this piece of land should be counted as a forest. Then India has the 10th highest forest coverage in the world. Under the guidance of this advanced system, India has included the pornography, gambling, drug industry, and even bribery income into GDP statistics and classified them as service industries. You can easily understand why. The American economics package once quoted Ma Dan, an internationally renowned economist and chief economist of CARE Ratings, as saying that if calculated according to the statistical method of the United States, India's GDP would immediately shrink by 50%. Conversely, India's GDP statistics system is twice as advanced as that of the United States. As long as we fully adopt and learn from India's system, then GDP can be doubled and then doubled out of thin air. But India's system is relatively backward in front of Taiwan. No matter how it is counted, the Bureau of Statistics of India still only counts economic activities that take place on Indian land, and its thinking is still too limited. It is indeed a little more advanced than the American system, but it is still far inferior to that of Taiwan. First of all, Taiwan has fully adopted the economic system of the United States and India. All peddlers and non-taxable pornography, gambling, and drug industries are all estimated to be included in GDP, but this is still far from enough to support the GDP data required by Taiwan's ruling authorities. Therefore, the Taiwan Bureau of Statistics innovatively designed a new system to include all economic activities on land outside Taiwan into the GDP of the island of Taiwan. As long as you are Taiwanese, all the output value you create from starting a company or factory anywhere in the world is considered Taiwan Island. Foxconn, for example, employs millions of people in mainland China and has annual revenues of 1 trillion Taiwan dollars in mainland China. This $1 trillion revenue is included in the Statistics Bureau of the mainland, and the Statistics Bureau of Taiwan is also included in its own GDP. This is truly a global creation, and now only Taiwan is doing this in the world, and it is the most advanced economic system of mankind. Even India, which has 60 million Chinese working overseas and receives hundreds of billions of dollars in remittances every year, can't be ashamed to do so, but Taiwan has insisted on this statistical system for 20 years. After inventing the set of advanced systems, Taiwan reversed the trend of stagnant GDP and realized the spectacle of continuously surging GDP. Under the premise of zero growth in population and wages for 30 years, Taiwan has miraculously doubled its GDP, creating a miracle in the history of human statistics. If we can learn all these advanced systems and improve the statistical method of GDP, then we can completely double the GDP of mainland China out of thin air. We can become the world's #1 GDP power overnight. Isn't it much better than the manufacturing industry rushing to GDP? On June 5th, Apple held WWDC 23, Global Developers Conference, with the theme of Code New Worlds. At the meeting, the MR, Mixed Reality, head-mounted display Vision Pro was released as the finale, priced at $3,499. It will go on sale in the United States in early 2024, and the global market will be later. Vision Pro is equipped with M2 Plus R1 dual chips and uses the Vision OS operating system. The wearer navigates through eyes, gestures, and voice. The main feature of this headset is the integration of AR, augmented reality, and VR, virtual reality, technologies, so that the wearer can stay in touch with the real world while experiencing the virtual world. At the application level, in addition to common games and movies, Vision Pro also expands office and leisure scenarios. According to Reuters, Apple has broken into the metaverse party of Facebook parent company Meta, which is the riskiest and biggest bet for the company since Apple launched the iPhone more than a decade ago. The report pointed out that the release of Vision Pro will be a test of Apple's current headset market. There are already many devices in this market, but they have yet to win over consumers. At the same time, this will also cause Apple to compete directly with Meta. Over the years, Apple and Meta have clashed over issues such as user privacy and control of the developer platform. The Mac brought us into the era of personal computing, the iPhone brought us into the era of mobile computing, and the Apple Vision Pro brought us into the era of spatial computing. Apple CEO Tim Cook said at the press conference, Vision Pro means a lot to Apple. This is the first new product launched by Apple after the release of Apple Watch in 2014. It is also the next generation terminal device that Apple has bet heavily on after the growth of iPhone and other products is sluggish. For Cook personally, this is likely to be his last work during Apple's tenure. But the capital market did not buy it. On the eve of the press conference, Apple's stock price once rose by more than 2%. After the release of Vision Pro, affected by factors such as the high price and the mass production time being later than market expectations, Apple's stock price fell from a high of $185 per share to $180. The total market value has evaporated by $84.5 billion from the highest point. Thomas Husson, principal analyst at Forrester Research, said it may take a while for Apple's new headset to catch on. The whole AR/VR space has been a little bit overhyped over the past few years with metaverses and these kinds of experiences. That's why I think it needs more time, he said. Tell you years ago that people were willing to pay close to $2,000 for a cell phone, and I don't think there are many people who would say they're willing to pay that much. Apple will charge an eye-popping $3,499 for its much-anticipated mixed reality headset, more than 3 times the price of rival Meta's most expensive headset, according to Bloomberg, which will test consumers' readiness for the project, which Apple sees as spend huge sums of money on technology for the future of computing technology. According to reports, Apple's strength in marketing is unmatched. They have successfully persuaded consumers to spend more and more money on smartphones, but the Vision Pro may be one of their biggest challenges. The apparent price could be as little as a few $100s. A $3,499 price tag would put the Vision Pro closer to the category of a high-end laptop than a small device. Chance Miller, author of the news website 9to5Mac, said after a trial that Vision Pro can test the user's vision to adapt. The headset is controlled by tapping your fingers to select objects, pinching to zoom in and out, like on an iPhone, and flicking your wrist to scroll. He said that it takes a certain amount of time to learn how to operate Vision OS, but after 30 minutes of experience, he has become accustomed to this method of use. In addition, during the experience, Apple will repeatedly emphasize that the headset can keep the user in touch with the real world around him. For example, he can look left and right at the other 2 people in the demo room. But after Apple's event frenzy faded, one key question remained: why would you want to wear a computer on your face? Why would you choose to wear Vision Pro instead of grabbing your smartphone, tablet, laptop or TV remote? Rivals Google, Microsoft, Meta, and others have all tried and failed to provide a satisfying, broad answer to what benefits their own devices are good for, the report said. So far, the technology has felt like asking for trouble. Judging from the effect of the press conference, the experience of Vision Pro is not much different from the existing products on the market. One of the highlights is that it abandons the handle of traditional VR devices and can realize free interaction only by gestures. Another feature is what Apple calls EyeSight, a screen on the outside of the headset that projects eyes as the user communicates with reality. At the software level, the linkage of multiple Apple apps in Vision Pro with iPhone, Mac, and other products is also an advantage that distinguishes it from other head-mounted display devices. But at this stage, Vision Pro can hardly be called mature. The high price, external power cord, and short battery life of 2 hours all make it a product with an extremely limited market. But there is a consensus in the industry: Apple's move is more important than anything else, because Apple's consistent style is to wait until the product experience is good enough before launching.